Hello, good morning. Welcome to BBC News. The Chancellor has signalled that 2014 will see further significant cuts to public spending, despite the recent upturn in the economy. George Osborne has warned a further £25 billion of spending cuts will be needed after the next election. He suggested making welfare savings by cutting housing benefit for under 25s and restricting council housing for those earning over £65,000 a year. His comments about future cuts come ahead of a speech he's due to deliver in the next few minutes, in which he's due to warn of a year of hard truths. Well, as it stands, the national debt is at over £1.2 trillion. This is our debt climbing now every second. Well, speaking this morning on the Today programme, this is what the Chancellor had to say.
We need to find a further £25 billion of cuts after the election. We have to make decisions about where, of course, those cuts are to be found. We have to make the decision about whether we seek them in departments or whether we seek them in the welfare. But the reason we need to make those savings, this is not an end in itself. This is a means to an end. And the end we seek is a country in control of its own destiny, that has an improving economy, that can compete in the global race, and a country which is saddled not just with a high deficit, but also a high debt, is one that can't do those things. So I'm saying, look, yes, the economy is improving. I'm visiting a manufacturing business here in the West Midlands this morning that is taking on people. That's great news, and it's part of a country that is on the rise. But if we don't continue to work through our plan, if we take the decision to say, well, look, we're through the worst and we'll squander the gains we made and we're going to go back to the bad old habits of borrowing and spending, then we will be back to square one, back to economic ruin. And my choice is, no, work through the plan, deliver that economy that is creating jobs and economic security for all.
George Osborne speaking on Radio 4's Today programme just before 8 this morning. Let's head over now to our political correspondent Ross Hawkins, who is attending the Chancellor's speech in Birmingham. And Ross is due to start speaking in the next few minutes or so. How specific do you think he's going to be? How much detail will we get today?
Well, a pretty limited amount of detail. We are here in the West Midlands at an industrial site, standing in a car park. We won't get a major fiscal statement. We won't get the sort of detail you might expect from a budget. But we might get a pretty firm idea of what the Chancellor sees when he looks into the details of the budget figures. We know already he's going to be talking about £25 billion spent less each year, a couple of years into the next Parliament, as compared to what the spending would have been if it had just risen at the same price as inflation. Gives you an idea of the sort of scale of cuts that he thinks are necessary and that he thinks are implied by the coalition's agreed plans. The big question will be, how much of that should come out of welfare budgets? He's mentioned a couple of things on the radio this morning, a couple of benefit cuts for under 25s, something Tories on their own would have done were they not stopped by the Lib Dems in this government. As an idea, that doesn't get you anywhere near £25 billion in a year cuts. So the question will be, what sort of hints will we get about where he might seek to find those savings in the future, if, of course, he's Chancellor after the next election?
Yeah, and so he's talking about figures, Ross, but this really is much about politics as it is about economics.
Yeah, and this is the big political row at the moment. Labour have been saying the issue here is the cost of living, how you feel at the moment, whether you feel the pound in your pocket is actually buying you much, or crucially that your salary is getting you much of a quality of life. Labour is saying, frankly, that's what people are concerned about, and that they feel pretty gloomy despite the statistics. George Osborne will be trying to throw forward here to look at the future and to say, well, what you really need to think about is what happens after the election, and to suggest, and you'll frankly hear this time and time again, that if you vote Tory, you'll get these cuts. If you vote Labour, they would do grave damage, he'll say, because they would undo all the good work he's done. Labour, of course, will say, well, hold on, this could have been a much faster recovery had it not been for your austerity, they contend. And they'll also point out a very simple fact, as you mentioned before, that the debt isn't falling. That's maybe one of the reasons why more cuts are needed, but it will put into context any questions, and I fully expect to hear them from the journalists if we don't hear them from the Chancellor himself, about whether he intends to cut taxes. He keeps on saying he'd like to, but what sort of assurances might we get?
OK, Ross, thanks very much indeed. We'll let you get in there and listen to the Chancellor's speech. This is the scene live in the West Midlands, where the Chancellor is due to deliver his speech. It's due to get underway, we think, in the next 5 minutes or so. We will, of course, have the speech in full and then reaction to it live here on BBC News.